My name's Moses and this is my whole family.
Moses was never on our radar.
After as he was still a baby at 5 weeks, his mother passed away of meningitis. 3 days after his mom had passed away, he ended up in one of the local orphanages. We really thank God that he did end up in an orphanage that had godly leadership, and it was an orphanage that actually we had connected to, or at least I had, through my university. In 2008, I got accepted for a trip and ended up coming here to Moshi to actually work with that orphanage, just the connection there. And that was actually the first time that I met Moses. Came back in 2009 and during that time got hired at the orphanage. Moses was one of the students in my preschool class because I was the education director. So started to build that relationship with him. It wasn't like this super connection during the time. In fact, Moses had really bonded with somebody else that worked at the orphanage. In 2010, after I had started working here, is actually when Melissa came and she met Moses for the first time. We ended up working at the orphanage for about 2.5 years altogether. It was actually in the middle of that where Melissa and I got married. We ended up leaving the orphanage in mid-2012 as Melissa was pregnant with our daughter Promise. So we ended up going on hiatus for about 1.5 years.
While we were on hiatus, the staff member that Moses was really connected to, even considered her like a mom, left the orphanage during that time. When we came back and saw him for the first time, it was really evident that he was really changed. The reason we went back to the orphanage is because there was a party that they invited us to. They're having like a goat roast. He's usually like life of the party, super extrovert, loud and fun and all that stuff.
The opposite of us.
He came up to me and he asked, "Mama Melissa, will you come eat with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." We went, there was a little prayer banda set up, a little prayer hut, and they had some tents that were set up, and he said, "Will you come sit with me in the tent?" He asked me, "When is my mom coming back?" It just really broke my heart, and I had to just say to him, I don't know when she's coming back. I don't know if she's coming back. He just kind of looked off in the distance and was just quiet. Just a couple years later, that moment would be something that would really change our whole lives. When we came back to Tanzania, I actually got pregnant with our son Shepherd pretty soon afterwards, and I was pregnant, and yet Brandon approached me and said, "Hey, what do you think about adoption?" And we always knew that we wanted to adopt. That was always a part of our story of what we wanted to do. But at the time when he asked me that, I was just like, "Are you crazy?"
It was during that furlough in 2014. There's an adoption and orphan care conference in San Luis Obispo, which is actually where we're from, and it's called Welcoming Children Home.
The main keynote speaker was this man named Johnny Carr. He said something that really stuck with me. He just basically talked about the ridiculousness of trying to adopt in birth order and not giving older children a chance. That was the first time I really felt challenged. Like, we wanted to adopt, but we wanted to do it in our own way, in our own plan, and adopt in birth order and kind of have it just look really nice and pretty and neat and, you know, put a bow on it. The weeks afterwards, I gave birth to our son Shepherd, and we were just staying in this 1-bedroom guest room, and all 4 of us in one room, and we just started talking about adoption and just saying, maybe we're supposed to adopt an older child. Like, what would that look like? And immediately the Lord chose us Moses. In that time, we began to have conversations with the orphanage directors. We just said, we've been praying and we feel like we're supposed to adopt Moses. And immediately they both start crying. And they said, we have specifically been praying that he would be adopted.
The plan was kind of, I don't want to say absurd, but it was totally out of left field. We were a family of 4. We had a girl and a boy, and it was the perfect little picture, and people actually would even say that to us. And we were basically just like, well, you know, what if we blow it up? We started the adoption process here in Tanzania. We first contacted an adoption lawyer in April, and we finalized by the end of August.
We went from 1 to 2 to 3 kids, all within 9 months. It was challenging. I mean, the quickness of everything, telling Moses and helping him to understand like what's really happening. He didn't even really know what adoption meant. When we told him that we wanted to adopt him, he like
Yeah.
It was a very underwhelming experience. Like, we thought it would just be like this emotional big thing, and it wasn't. Like, he just kind of didn't understand. He was like, okay. But then to go from that when we first told him to us telling him the judge said yes, that was what we told him. The whole process is that the judge has to say yes. You know, he was in the orphanage for his whole life up until 8 years old, and really just showing him for the first time what is a family, what does it mean to be a son, what does it mean to have a mom and a dad and have structure and discipline and healthy meals every day and nighttime routine. At the end of the day, even though it might be hard, we're still there for him, and when he wakes up in the middle of the night, we'll come running for him. Even, you know, see him playing baseball. Like, when he came home, he had no clue how to throw a baseball, who the Dodgers were, anything like that. And it's just been really beautiful to see him and Brandon outside every day playing baseball, pretending like he's Clayton Kershaw. He had no idea about any of those things, and now it's like something he loves so much. And I think it's because he understands that it's a passion of his father, and just taking up the passions of his father too. Just what a redemptive picture that is of the gospel. He's so good with his brother and sister, and they love him so much, and it's really cool. You know, we never thought that our lives would look like this. The biggest part of our story is that what we want people to see is that when we lay down our good plans to the Lord for God's greater plans, it's really hard sometimes, but it's amazing. And to just know that this boy who was an orphan his whole life and is now a son, and his life is forever transformed. I mean, can you ask for anything much better? Like, it doesn't get much better than that. The
truth is that we didn't know what we were getting into. It wasn't just this, well, we pushed through those 5 months of the adoption process and then everything was, you know, rainbows and butterflies. It's only by God's grace that any of this has happened, or even that this morning we got up and got him to school, you know, together with Promise. That's God's grace. Like, God's grace is what has sustained us this entire time, and often we lose sight of that. This is a story that a lot of people walk through, and we want even more. It's really our heart that this would be common here in East Africa.
I remember when Warren and Christina, the directors of the orphanage, when they were talking with us when we said we wanted to adopt Moses, and I just, this one thing that Christina said, and she said, Melissa, if this boy does not get adopted, it's not going to end well for him.
As we reflect on Moses' story, as we reflect on even the stories of other kids, if they don't get someone, specifically if they don't get, you know, parents in their lives, it's not going to go well for them. And that's really the heart of our ministry here as well. While we consider Moses' adoption 100% a part of our family and not a part of our ministry, at the same time, it's what we want to see take place in Tanzania, specifically having kingdom families be a part of that movement. You know, God leads the movement. We're not leading the movement, but what does it look like to actually establish a spirit of adoption in a culture that doesn't really know it? How do we ask, you know, Romans 8, God, well up the spirit of adoption in this country, and that's really our aim. Moses he's a huge drop in the bucket because he's huge to us. He's our son and we love him, but there is an ocean out there of kids that need this same thing. They need moms and dads. If we're gonna see any change, it has to start with the church. It has to start with a father and a mother that are empowered by the Spirit and fed by their pastor and other leadership at their church that say, I can be a part of the solution. Yeah. God can use me in that way.
Part of when we adopted Moses, a thing that we prayed over him, just like Moses in the Bible, that he would just lead a generation of children out of institutionalized care. It's just been really beautiful to see from our obedience to adopt him, and in that process where he became the first out of that orphanage to be adopted, and now there are kids that are adoptable from the orphanage or have been adopted. It's not on us to convince people like this is what you should do just because we did it. Only the Lord is going to be able to do it. The thing that he keeps talking to me about is my kingdom's not an orphanage. My kingdom is a family, and I've adopted you. You are no longer orphans. You are sons and daughters. And if that's what I do in heaven, then when you pray that my kingdom will come and my will will be done on earth as it is in heaven, what does that really look like? What does the kingdom really look like? Because it looks like family and it looks like adoption. adoption. If the kingdom looks like that, then we have to do that here on earth. He was born and named Mohammed Shafi. He was renamed Moses Kasimbo when he entered the orphanage, and now he's Moses Michael Stiver, and that's pretty cool.
That's our son.